Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Trust the year's gone well. It's whizzed by. We're at the end of it now. And this will be my last podcast before the new year. Let me start with a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson in Memoriam. Ring out wild bells. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind for those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life, with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out the old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. This poem is in the public domain. Macro thoughts. This is just phenomenal. Long Island Iced Tea Corporation is up 625%. This was yesterday in the pre-market after company announced it was rebranding itself as Long Blockchain Corporation. Bubble tea. This is a chart from Heidi Lun. Company sells, yes, iced tea had a net loss of $11.6 million this year. Now it's all happening on Bitcoin, extended losses below $14,000. Then it slumped below $13,000. It's now trading at $12,860. Cryptocurrency, which was at about $1,000 at the year's start, climbed to a record of 19,666 on Sunday in lead up to exchange giant CME Group's launch of Bitcoin futures before losing steam. Bitcoin is known to go through wild swings. In November, it tumbled almost 30% in 4 days. In September, it fell 40%. So we're seeing tremendous volatility in it now, and I'll come to some other thoughts in a moment. This is a photo of a copy of a Bitcoin standing on a PC motherboard. So now we're below 13,000, last trading at 12,718. I wrote about Bitcoin again. I wrote about it at the beginning of the year when I made it my trade of the year, and then on the 27th of November, admittedly ahead of quite a sharp run higher, I said this: it is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed once or twice, guessed and refused to believe that everything always collectively had been moving toward that purified shape, latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. And on the 27th of November, I said, let me leave you with Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson said this: life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." Interestingly, from Bloomberg Gadfly, Bitcoin whales are cutting back. If you're Bitcoin rich and sitting on enormous life-changing gains, here's a tip from the pros. Sell loudly, publicly, and theatrically. You might just avoid charges of epic hypocrisy. A trawl through the Bitcoin rich list this year using the Wayback Machine, a non-profit digital archive of the web, shows an explosion in the number of huddled masses holding fractions of the digital token. But the ranks of the Bitcoin wealthy have thinned. There are more minnows, but fewer whales. Everyone's richer in dollar terms, but the balance of new ownership is shifting to the little guy. Realized vols in Bitcoin are unlike anything we've seen in other asset classes. That's JP Morgan. And then I take you back to Taleb, deriving the distribution of Bitcoin, assuming long return student T is specified by finance quant. And essentially, he was saying it can go anywhere. That theoretically go to 100,000 or it can go to zero, and I think that's the main point. Bitcoin, the original cryptocurrency, was valued at 8 cents in July 2010, $8,100 on November 20th, 2017, and $17,900 on December the 15th, 2017. And now 12,982. Interesting comparison, comparative valuations of the Nikkei, the S&P, queen of charts. It was winter solstice in the UK yesterday, and this is something from Patrice Belton explaining what winter solstice is. And of course, everyone is trooped down to Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument in Wiltshire. It consists of a ring of standing stones, with each standing stone around 13 feet wide, 13 feet high, and 7 feet wide, weighing around 25 tons. The stones are set within earthworks in the middle of the most dense complex of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments in England, including several hundred burial mounds. Archaeologists believe it was constructed from 3000 BC to 2000 BC. The surrounding circular earth bank and ditch, which constitute the earliest phase of the monument, have been dated to about 3100 BC. Stonehenge could have been a burial ground from its earliest beginnings. Deposits containing human bone date from as early as 3000 BC, when the ditch and bank were first dug, and continued for at least another 500 years. Enjoy this glimpse of American post-minimalist Bruce Neumann's 1984 neon work, 100 Live and Die. I like this photograph by, this painting by Henry Rousseau, The Sleeping Gypsy. And this looks great, foie gras ribbons with orange chips by the pool. As a general rule, the dishes that dominate Instagram are prettier than they are delicious. Meet the exception. The splashy pool sorry in the Seagram's building, chef and partner Rich Torrisi has reinvented the foie gras terrine, shaving chilled slices of the velvety liver into ribbons that are arranged in an icebox to stunning effect. Better still are the accompanying chips, made from plain old Florida oranges. They're thinly sliced, doused in syrup, and then oven dried so they're as light and crispy as potato chips. The luscious foie gras, spread on those sweet salted citrus crisps, is one combination you'll never ever forget. That's some compliment. Let's move on to political reflections. Hiroji Kubota. This photograph is of the Black Panthers protesting in Chicago, Illinois, 1969 via Magnum Photos, highly evocative. This is a video from this morning's Houthi missile launch at Riyadh. This is, I think, the third missile that's been launched. Houthi rebels in Yemen said they had fired a ballistic missile at one of the Saudi king's palaces. On the 13th of November, I wrote, "The paranoia in the palaces in Saudi Arabia is real and existential. See who abstained and who voted for the General Assembly resolution. Benjamin Netanyahu's last visit to Nairobi made the entire region abstain. Tanzania and Somalia are the only exception. Total of 128 countries backed the resolution, which is non-binding. 9 voted against and 35 abstained. 21 countries did not cast a vote." Read this. This is the government of Botswana's statement to raid the UN vote on the status of Jerusalem. And clearly, this is a highly volatile situation. I don't think the Palestinians have the energy to launch another intifada. And in a way, this announcement is quite cynical because it had that situational awareness. South Sudan's Rebecca Garang calls on President Kiir to step down. I think he's really led South Sudan into the wilderness. Look at this photograph. Isolé au Moyen-Orient, l'émir du Qatar entame une tournée en Afrique de l'Ouest. He's visiting West Africa, Senegal. I think he's navigated his way pretty adroitly out of the situation, although at considerable expense. Here are the weekly tweet schedules of the 38 bot accounts. They are very, very similar. And this takes me back to December 2016 when I was saying the first thing is plausible deniability, the second thing is non-linearity. You have to learn how to navigate a linear system, the new 21st century digital ecosystem, in a non-linear way. When you launch a social media campaign where 100 bots repeat the same thing verbatim, like Mombasa did last week, then your very linearity is a monumental look, it's me sign. Look at this witty response from the Russian embassy in London. Last night we got an urgent request from the FT to comment on a report of the Intelligence and Security Committee, almost all of which was classified. Here's our response. The comeback kid Russian default probability drops to an all-time low. October 2015, I spoke about how Putin is a geopolitical grandmaster. He's also a financial grandmaster. So he reordered the oil markets in his favor and did much more. Daily Maverick African Person of the Year, Grace Mugabe, the vanquisher of Robert. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar dumped in the early hours of the night, down to about 118.10. We're now back at 118.55. Dollar index below 93.50 at 93.39. Japanese yen 113.40. Swiss franc 0.9891. The pound 133.80. The Australian dollar 0.7708. India rupee 64.045. South Korean won 1078.50. That's been on a bit of a roll of late. Brazilian real 330.83. Egyptian pound 17.8590, and the rand holding the 1275 line. Dollar index, I'll put up a chart here. I think notwithstanding the current situation, which is this massive tax cut, I think the dollar's going to struggle. Personally, from the way it's trading, it should have been much higher at this point in time. Rajoy and his allies have been defeated. They've taken a beating from the Catalans. This is Carlos Puigdemont. 3 separatist groups claim 70 seats in the 135-strong assembly to restore a majority they lost in October when Rajoy used Article 155 of the Constitution to oust the rebel administration before it could put a declaration of independence into effect. Rajoy's People's Party took a hammering, losing 8 of its 11 lawmakers as voters opposed to secessionists shifted to Ciudadanos, who've been demanding harsher measures against the secessionist push. Euro dollar reportedly slipped earlier, reportedly on worries about the prospect of a minority government in Berlin. Take a look at the chart. We're back at 118.54 now. WTI crude oil last trading at $58.20. My target is $64.99. Gold has been staging a recovery. We're now at 1267.64. I like this photograph. A man rows along the Yamuna River shrouded in smog in New Delhi on November the 11th. Ugandan MPs voted to scrap presidential age limits, paving the way for President Museveni to serve a sixth term in office. This was largely expected. I like this photograph, the crocodile and the buffalo. The buffalo being Cyril Ramaphosa, the crocodile being Mr. Lacoste himself, Emerson Mnangagwa. I asked on the 18th of December, will it be 1994 all over again? Ramaphosa is seen as market friendly and has said we will wash the ANC clean. If Ramaphosa succeeds in wresting the leadership of the ANC, South African asset prices will enter the sweetest of sweet spots. Global investors will surely buy the rand by the bucket load, and we could see a further meaningful rally in the order of 10% towards 12 versus the dollar. Ramaphosa could well be the ignition for returning South Africa back to that incredible moment full of promise, and I think he's going to aim there, but he's got a lot of work to do. And on the 20th of November, I was writing about Zimbabwe, and I said the genie is out of the bottle. I said what is clear is Zimbabwe is entering a new normal, and that in the medium term, Zimbabwe has the potential to be one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. I said people want to grab that opportunity with both hands. At the time, I was waiting for the composition of the new government, and I was sort of advocating for a unity government. I said that the government, that ZANU-PF need to invite the opposition into the government, look for a big cash boost, which they've actually got from Afreximbank in order to stabilize the now. But however, my conclusions today are that ZANU-PF is not keen on getting everyone in the tent, it appears. African bonds have returned more than the emerging market average. That's from Paul Wallace. Africa's debt is already becoming less attractive on a relative basis. US 10-year yields rose to the highest in 9 months this week, which narrowed African dollar spreads to 347 basis points, the lowest in more than 3 years. Lagarde, in a wide-ranging interview in Quartz Africa, talking about Africa's mounting debt crisis will worsen if the US and Europe's economies improve. Quartz, let's start with the dark clouds on the horizon that you made reference to in your speech, and specifically the debt burden. How worried are you about what some have called a ticking debt bomb? Lagarde, I think there are a few things that are important. One is the usual ratio of debt to GDP, which in about half of the sub-Saharan African countries now exceeds 50%, or a little less than half. The second thing I think is important is the debt service relative to budget, and then for balance of payment purposes is the ratio of debt to export and debt service to export. So it's all that taken into account which actually matters, combined with the final indicator, which is domestic revenue mobilization. And there are countries in Africa, I'm not going to point fingers at any of them, but some of them are seriously at risk. Do you think 2018 could be the year that the debt problem finally explodes? She says you can't borrow your development out of forgiveness programs. It could very well. What could trigger some very serious developments is actually the improvements in advanced economies. Because if you see a combination of those elements I mentioned, plus the appreciation of some currencies, take the dollar, which has been the currency of issuance for some of those bond issuances, and took place over the last few years, and a tightening of monetary policies in the US, maybe in the Euro area, certainly in the UK, and one of these days in Japan. And if you combine this all together, it will certainly make the burden of debt harder to bear in some of these countries. So I think the debt debt service issue is a concern that we have, and a concern I hope some of the policymakers have as well. And I'm certain some of the creditor countries are very attentive to that. IMF ends week-long mission to Congo Republic without a bailout deal. Congo Republic has debt to GDP at 110% of GDP at the end of July. The Bourse Régionale des Valeurs Mobilières benchmark is poised for its worst performance since 2009, and that's against a sea of outperformance in African stock markets. This stock index is based in the Ivory Coast, capital of Abidjan, featuring stocks from 7 francophone countries, as well as Guinea-Bissau has dropped 23% this year. Worst performance since 2009. If you compare the dividends that were distributed and the share prices, there was a clear phase shift, so the stocks have started to fall. Some companies have recorded poor performances, but even some of those that had good performances didn't give high dividends. Tanzania said Bharti Airtel's local unit belongs to state-owned Tanzania Telecommunications Company, a claim that sets up an ownership dispute between the government and the Indian phone operator. Airtel, according to the information we have, is an asset of Tanzania Telecommunications Company. This is President John Magufuli. On Wednesday, a terrible game was played. He said, "I don't want to say more than that." The President asked Finance Minister Philip Mpango to follow up on the claim. His comments below follow a 2016 order for telecoms companies to sell at least a quarter of their units on the local bourse to boost domestic ownership. Vodacom, its Tanzania operations, became the largest company on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange when it raised $213 million in August. Airtel has yet to list Airtel Tanzania, in which the government has a 40% stake. The company is the country's third largest wireless carrier, 10.6 million voice subscribers as of the end of September. I take you back to an article I wrote when I quoted Aliko Dangote, who says they are coming through the back door to seize your assets. And I was describing what had happened with Barrick Gold, and I asked the question for Tanzania is this: is Tanzania still an investment destination, or will this prove, and I was referring to Barrick, a Pyrrhic victory? South African all shares up 16.03% year to date. As I wrote recently, we could see a further meaningful rally in the order of 10% towards 12 versus the dollar for the rand. Take a look at this chart. Dollar rand, we've had a substantial rally of late. Christo Visa, he continues to sell ShopRite's shares, and the situation with Steinhoff looks as if it's crossed its Lehman moment. And I was opining on the forensic intellectual cul-de-sac, which seemed to take hold amongst vast swathes of South African media when it came to discussing Steinhoff. Nigerian all shares up 42.7% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 51.37% so far this year. This tweet is from Najib Balala. Happy birthday, Your Excellency William Ruto. May God grant all your heart's desires today. This is Island Camp on Lake Baringo from Janet Machuka. I was asked what I thought about the shilling. I said the biggest risk I see for the shilling is a further rally in the crude oil price. Kenya shilling last at 103.05 and one of the most stable and convertible currencies on the continent. All the plans are no longer valid, says the Carrefour country manager regarding Kenya. They see it as an opportunity with Nakumatt on its knees and then being very aggressive and taking new space. Flame Tree Group issued a profits warning. Expected decline is primarily attributable to the challenging trading environment in the second half as a result of the prolonged electioneering period, in addition to write-offs made on prior period trade receivables held by leading supermarket chains in Kenya. Not difficult to work out who that is. the link for Flame Tree's share price data, first half results, where the EPS was unchanged, is there as well. NSE 20 up 15.98% year to date. I like this photograph, One Green Hill, Chulu Hill, Savo. And also take a look finally at a video that we posted of our trip to Savo West when we stayed at Finch Hattons. I wish you a fantastic Christmas and a great New Year. We shall see each other in 2018. Thank you for the support.